My father kicked me out of the house because I became a burden to him, but when I stopped paying, they wanted to rob me. Hey everyone, before I get into this, I just want to ask for a quick favor. If you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and turn on notifications. It really helps out, and honestly, not enough people stick around till the end. Thanks. Now let's get into it. Hi Reddit. I guess you could say my life is a never-ending loop of paying bills, coming home exhausted, and still somehow feeling like I'm the least important person in my own family. I'm Tyler, 23, and I work full-time. Not for myself. Oh no, that would be too simple. I work to keep my family afloat because, without me, everything would fall apart. Let me introduce you to the cast of my life. There's my dad, Phil. He's been unemployed for 4 years and spends his days on the couch, flipping through news channels, cursing at politicians, and going on about how the economy is screwed. You'd think he'd be actively looking for work, right? Nope. His full-time job is being miserable and making sure everyone else in the house hears about it. Then there's my mom, Cheryl. She works part-time, and while I appreciate that she at least tries, she barely makes enough to cover the mortgage. She's tired, always worried, and stuck in this cycle of trying to make excuses for my dad while also subtly hinting at me to do more. Because I don't already do enough. Mia, my younger sister, is 16. She's probably the only decent person in this house. She's smart, kind, and does her best to avoid our dad's temper. She keeps her head down and just tries to survive until she can leave for college. I respect her for that. And then there's Liam, the golden child, the one who left but never really left. He's my older brother, and according to my dad, he's the second coming of Christ himself. Even though Liam doesn't live here anymore, he somehow still gets treated like royalty. He only ever shows up when he needs money. And of course, guess who's the one handing it over? Me. My dad doesn't even hesitate to throw money Liam's way, despite never having a dollar to contribute to the household. But me? The one who actually keeps the lights on. I don't even get a thank you. Let's talk about what I do. I pay for everything. Electricity? Me. Water? Me. Internet? Me. Groceries? Me. Gas for mom's car? Me. If there's an unexpected expense, guess who gets hit up first? It's a miracle they haven't asked me to cover their personal luxuries too. Oh wait, they have. I get home every day from work exhausted, and the first thing I hear isn't, "Hey, how was your day?" Or, "Thanks for everything you do." It's complaints. Why is the Wi-Fi slow? We need more groceries. The car needs gas again. Can you give Liam some money? He's struggling. Struggling? The guy lives in a nicer apartment than I do and somehow still gets away with being broke. It's not even about the money anymore. It's about respect, or the complete lack of it. There was this one time when the electricity bill came in higher than usual. I had been working overtime to cover extra expenses, and I just needed a minute to breathe. So I asked, just once, if Dad could maybe contribute, even just a little. His response: "I don't have the money. You're young. You can handle it." Young. That's always the excuse. Because I'm young, I should be fine with carrying the entire household on my back. Because I'm young, my exhaustion doesn't count. Because I'm young, I should just deal with it. Liam, though, he's not expected to lift a finger. He waltzes in whenever he pleases, complains about how tough life is, and then somehow convinces my dad to guilt-trip me into giving him money. He's your brother, Tyler. Family helps family. Family helps family? Where the hell is my help? I work 50 hours a week, come home to a house full of ungrateful people, and the one person who might actually appreciate me, Mia, is too afraid to say anything because she knows speaking up will just make her dad turn his anger toward her. So, she stays quiet. And I stay resentful. The worst part? I've started to feel like I don't even exist as a person anymore. I'm just a walking ATM that sleeps in the guest room. Oh yeah, because my old room? Liam still technically owns it. He doesn't live here, but Mom refuses to touch it because it's still his room. So I sleep in a converted office space with a cheap mattress, while Liam's pristine, untouched room sits there collecting dust. But hey, at least it's ready for him whenever he decides to grace us with his presence. I know what you're thinking. Why don't you just leave? Trust me, I ask myself that every damn day. But if I leave, Mia suffers. My mom suffers. And as much as I hate to admit it, that still matters to me. The guilt is what keeps me here. But I can feel it building. This pressure, this growing rage inside of me. The moment when I finally snap, when I finally pack up and walk away. And when that day comes, I wonder if they'll even notice I'm gone. I don't think my dad has worked a single day in the past 4 years. Yet somehow he always has the most to say about everyone else's job situation. He sits on the couch, flipping between news channels and YouTube conspiracy videos, going on endless rants about how the government is screwing over people like him. According to him, it's not his fault he's unemployed. It's the system, the corporations, the rigged economy. It's never that he just doesn't try. He has an excuse for everything. Liam, my older brother, is exactly the same way, just lazier and with better PR. He doesn't even pretend to be a victim of the system. He just leeches off of it. He lives in a decent apartment, somehow never has money for bills, and yet always has enough for new shoes or a night out. But when he calls home, he plays the struggling underdog act so well that my dad practically shoves my money into his hands. It's funny how I, the one keeping this household running, am the one who gets mocked. A few weeks ago, I sat my dad down and tried, just once, to have a real conversation about it. I brought up the idea of him picking up a job somewhere. Not a career, not a high-paying corporate role, just anything. Amazon was hiring for warehouse work. A local hardware store had a position open for stocking shelves. I even found a delivery driver job that required nothing but a license and a willingness to drive. He laughed in my face. Amazon, he scoffed, shaking his head. So you want me to break my back for some billionaire while they treat me like dirt? Yeah, no thanks. It's better than sitting here all day doing nothing. I shot back. That got him riled up. Doing nothing? You think I don't contribute? I keep this family together, Tyler. I'm the one holding everything down. Holding everything down? You don't even pay for your own damn internet bill. That set him off into another tirade. This time about how I had no respect, how young people don't understand what it was like back in the day, how my generation is brainwashed into thinking hard work pays off. He went on, listing off reasons why he couldn't work. His back wasn't great. His knee hurt sometimes. He was too old to be taking orders from some 20-something manager who didn't know anything about life. Meanwhile, I work 50-hour weeks and come home to this nonsense. Liam, of course, had his own opinions when I suggested he get a job that didn't involve running back to me for money. He acted like I had personally insulted him. Dude, I'm looking, he said, as if those words alone should have been enough to make me shut up. Looking where? At the ceiling? You haven't had a job in months. Because I'm waiting for the right opportunity, he said, rolling his eyes. I'm not about to waste my time on some dead-end job just because you think I should. I wanted to scream. I work a so-called dead-end job, and somehow, I'm the one paying for everything while these two sit around making excuses. And my mom, as much as I love her, doesn't do much to help. She sighs, says she understands, but then turns around and tells me, Tyler, you know how they are. Yeah, I do. That's the problem. The only person who doesn't make me feel like a walking ATM is Mia. And that's the only reason I'm still here. She's 16, trying to keep her head down, trying not to attract our dad's attention because she knows how easily he turns his frustration into yelling. I see the way she flinches when he raises his voice. I see how she immediately tries to fix things before they turn into an argument. She shouldn't have to live like this. If I leave, she's stuck here alone with them. And that thought keeps me in this house, keeps me working myself into the ground while two grown men treat me like an idiot for actually having a job. I know this can't last forever. I know at some point, I have to choose myself. But for now, I stay. For Mia. Lately, something has felt off in the house. I can't quite put my finger on it, but the atmosphere is different. Heavier. Liam has been showing up more than usual, which is already suspicious considering he usually only comes around when he needs money. But this time, it's not just quick visits to grab a few bills from me before disappearing again. He lingers. He spends hours here, sitting in the living room with Dad, both of them speaking in hushed voices, lowering their tones even more whenever I walk past. Whenever I come home from work, I find them sitting together, their conversations immediately stopping the moment I enter the room. It's not subtle. They glance at each other, give me quick nods, and then wait in silence, like two kids caught doing something they shouldn't. I can tell Liam is enjoying whatever little secret they're keeping. He smirks sometimes, barely hiding his amusement when I ask what's going on. Nothing, man, he says, stretching like he has all the time in the world. Just talking with Dad. About what? Stuff. And that's all I get. Dad doesn't even bother coming up with a convincing lie. He just gives me a dismissive look, like I don't need to know. Mom, on the other hand, has been acting different. Nervous. She's always been a little on edge, always trying to keep the peace, but now it's like she's constantly walking on eggshells. I've caught her staring at me with this guilty expression more than once, like she wants to say something but stops herself at the last second. Whenever I enter a room, she either goes quiet or suddenly finds an excuse to leave. The other day, I came into the kitchen while she was chopping vegetables for dinner. She was on the phone, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. The second she saw me, she froze, her hand gripping the knife a little too tightly. Then, without saying a word, she ended the call and went back to slicing like nothing happened. Who was that? I asked. No one, she answered too quickly. I let it slide, but the uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger. Even Mia has been acting differently. She's always quiet around our dad, But lately, she's been even more withdrawn. She watches me closely, like she knows something I don't. When I asked her if everything was okay, she hesitated for a moment before forcing a small smile and nodding. Yeah, she said, but I didn't believe her. Something is going on. But honestly, I don't have the energy to care. I work, I pay the bills, I deal with their nonsense, and now, on top of that, I have to wonder what kind of secret meetings Liam and Dad are having behind my back. Maybe it's just another scheme to get money out of me. Maybe they're planning some ridiculous favor they expect me to fulfill. Whatever it is, I don't have time for it. My birthday is coming up soon, not that I expect anything special. In this house, birthdays are just another day. Maybe they're planning some half-hearted dinner, maybe not. Either way, I don't care. At least, that's what I tell myself. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was quieter than usual, but not in a peaceful way. More like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving behind a heavy, unnatural silence. The dining table was set, which was already strange. We don't do family dinners, not really. Most nights, Mom eats alone, Dad picks at whatever is in the fridge between his political rants. Mia takes her plate to her room, and I either eat late after work or skip it altogether. But tonight, the table was full, plates, glasses, even a small cake sitting off to the side. And the strangest part? Everyone looked cheerful. Liam was the first to greet me, and his tone was so friendly it made my skin crawl. There he is. The birthday boy. He grinned, standing up and clapping me on the back like we were old friends instead of siblings who barely tolerated each other. I eyed him suspiciously, then glanced at the rest of them. Mom was fidgeting, her hands wringing together as she sat at the table. Her smile was weak, forced, like someone holding back tears. Mia wasn't even pretending. She looked tense, her shoulders drawn up, her eyes darting between me and our dad. And speaking of Dad, he was already watching me, his expression unreadable, like he was waiting for the right moment to speak. I hesitated. What's going on? Liam let out a laugh, too casual, too rehearsed. Dude, relax. We just wanted to have a nice dinner for your birthday. Thought we could all sit down, have a meal, be a family for once. Bull. My gut twisted as I pulled out a chair and sat down. The food was already on the table, but no one was eating yet. They were waiting. For what? I didn't know. The first few minutes were unbearable. The fake small talk. Liam acting like he cared about my job, asking how work was going, nodding like he was genuinely interested. Mom pushing food onto my plate, but barely touching hers. Mia not saying a single word. The tension was suffocating, pressing in on me, making every bite taste like cardboard. Then, right as I was about to ask what the hell was actually going on, Dad leaned back in his chair, cleared his throat, and delivered his words like a punch to the gut. Tyler, you're a burden. And we've decided it's time for you to move out. For a second, I thought I misheard him. I set my fork down, staring at him, waiting for him to say something else, waiting for a punchline that never came. What? Dad sighed, like he was tired of explaining something obvious. You've been here long enough. It's time you figured things out on your own. The words didn't make sense. They rattled around in my brain, hitting walls, refusing to sink in. I blinked at him, then at Liam, who was smirking behind his glass of water. I pay for everything, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The bills, the food, the gas, the internet, everything. How am I a burden? Dad just waved a dismissive hand, as if I hadn't just laid out the financial backbone of this entire house. Liam's moving back in, he said, leaning forward and resting his arms on the table. He's going to handle things from now on. I almost laughed. Handle what? I snapped. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't pay for anything. You think he's just going to magically start taking care of this place? Liam chuckled, shaking his head. Relax, man. I've got things figured out. Dad and I talked, and this is just what makes sense. Sense. I looked at Mom. She was staring down at her plate, gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles were turning white. She wasn't saying a word. I turned to Mia next. She was pale, eyes wide, hands clenched into fists on her lap. She wasn't eating. She wasn't blinking. She looked terrified. That's when it hit me. They had planned this. All those hushed conversations. All those glances. The sudden secretive behavior. They had decided this, talked about it behind my back, made their little arrangements, and then strung me along, letting me come home thinking everything was normal until they could drop this bomb on me over dinner like it was just another Tuesday night. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. Unbelievable, I muttered under my breath. Dad narrowed his eyes. Don't make this dramatic, Tyler. I stared at him in disbelief. Dramatic? You're kicking me out of my own house on my birthday and telling me not to be dramatic? Liam let out an exaggerated sigh. Dude, don't be so sensitive. It's not that deep. Not that deep. I wanted to grab my plate and throw it across the room. Mom still wasn't saying anything. Not one word. She was just sitting there, letting it happen. And Mia looked like she wanted to scream, but didn't know how. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. Wow. You know what? Fine. I stood up. If you want me gone so bad, I'll go. Dad just nodded, as if that was the expected answer. Liam grinned, clearly pleased with himself. I turned one last time, looking at my mom, silently daring her to say something, to stand up for me, to tell me this was a mistake. But she didn't. She just lowered her head, letting the silence do the talking. Mia, however, looked like she was about to burst into tears. And that hurt more than anything else. I didn't say another word. I just turned on my heel and walked upstairs to my room, my footsteps slow, measured, controlled. If they expected me to argue, to beg, to plead for my place in this house, they were going to be disappointed. Instead, I grabbed a suitcase from my closet and started packing. Clothes, essentials, my work laptop, things that actually mattered. I didn't have much worth taking, but what I did have, I made sure to pack neatly, efficiently, like this was just another chore to check off my list. My hands were steady, my breathing even. Downstairs, I could hear them talking. How are we going to pay for everything? My mother's voice was tight with worry, lower than usual, as if she didn't want me to hear. Liam will figure it out, my dad answered dismissively. I almost laughed at that. Liam? Figure it out? The same Liam who had never paid for anything in his life? The same Liam who had spent years bouncing between apartments, barely scraping by, only surviving because of my money? Yeah, let's see how that works out for them. I zipped up my suitcase, grabbed my phone, and sat down on my bed. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make sure they felt my absence in the worst way possible. First, I opened my online account with the electric company. With a few clicks, I canceled the autopay, removed my card, and requested a shutoff for the next day. Done. Next, the water bill. Canceled. Internet. Gone. Netflix. Logged out, and subscription terminated. Mobile plan. Well, since I was the one paying for the entire family's phone lines, it only took a few taps to remove them from my plan, leaving them with nothing but dead devices. Every single bill that had my name attached to it, I wiped my hands clean of it. By morning, they'd wake up in a house without power, without water, without internet, without Netflix, without even a way to make a damn phone call. Liam wanted to take over? Fine. Let him start with a pile of unpaid bills and no way to fix them. I glanced around my room one last time, then grabbed my bag, my keys, and my wallet. It was past midnight now. Everyone was asleep, unaware of what was coming. I walked down the stairs without making a sound, slipping through the front door and stepping out into the night without looking back. Let's see how well they do without me. 3 days was all it took for everything to fall apart. I had expected them to call sooner, but I suppose it took them a while to realize just how much I had been holding everything together. The first call came early in the morning while I was already awake, sitting in my temporary place and drinking coffee in complete peace for the first time in years. My phone buzzed on the table, and when I saw my mother's name flashing on the screen, I knew exactly why she was calling. I let it ring a few times before answering, keeping my voice calm and emotionless. Hello. Her voice came through in a frantic rush, thick with panic. Tyler, something's wrong with the house. The electricity is out, the water isn't running, and the internet is completely down. I don't know what's happening, but I didn't let her finish. I don't live there anymore, I said flatly. Not my problem. For a second, there was nothing but silence on the other end of the line, heavy and suffocating. When she finally spoke again, her tone had softened, almost pleading. Tyler, this has to be some kind of mistake. The bills must not have gone through. Can you? I cut her off before she could even try to guilt-trip me. No, I said coldly. I was the one paying for everything. You told me to leave, so I did. And I took my money with me. She sucked in a sharp breath, as if she had finally realized the weight of what they had done. But how are we supposed to? I didn't care to hear the rest. Liam will figure it out, I said, throwing my father's own words back at her. That's what you all decided, isn't it? I ended the call before she could say anything else. Not even 5 minutes passed before my phone started buzzing again. This time, it was my dad. I didn't pick up. Then it was Liam. Ignored. Then my dad again. I let it ring, watched it go to voicemail, and when the notification popped up, I played it just to hear how furious he was. You little piece of garbage. You think this is funny? You think you can just walk away and leave us in a mess? You're gonna regret this, Tyler. You hear me? Get your ass back here and fix this now. I deleted the voicemail without hesitation. The calls didn't stop after that. My mother called again, her voice more desperate each time. Liam sent texts, his usual smug confidence replaced with what almost sounded like panic. Dude, seriously? The power company says we owe a ton of money. What the hell did you do? You need to fix this, man. We don't even have working Wi-Fi. Dad is losing his mind. Tyler, come on. Be reasonable. Reasonable. That word made me laugh. I had spent years being reasonable while they drained me dry. I had worked myself into exhaustion so they could sit around and do nothing. I had been reasonable every time my dad belittled me, every time Liam acted entitled to my money, every time my mother stood by and let it all happen. Now, they could figure it out on their own. The only person I didn't block was Mia. I sent her a single text. If you need anything, I'm here. Just you. A few minutes later, she responded. I'm sorry. I knew they were planning something, but I didn't know it would be this bad. I stared at the message for a moment before replying. It's not your fault. Just stay out of the chaos. And when you're ready, I'll help you get out too. That was the only part of that house I still cared about. As for the rest of them, they were on their own now. For the first time in years, my money belonged to me. There was no endless stream of bills draining my account, no one expecting me to cover groceries or utilities, no guilt hanging over my head every time I spent something on myself. I hadn't felt this kind of freedom in a long time, and it was almost disorienting. I was staying with Chris, an old friend who didn't ask too many questions. He had a spare room in his apartment, and when I told him I needed a place to crash for a little while, he didn't hesitate. It wasn't much, a small space with a mattress on the floor and a desk shoved into the corner, but it was mine, and it was quiet. I spent the first couple of days doing nothing but adjusting to the absence of responsibility. I didn't have to come home to my dad's complaints. I didn't have to listen to Liam brag about his non-existent plans. I didn't have to worry about whether there was enough food in the fridge because, for once, I was only feeding myself. I sat in silence sometimes, just taking in the feeling of not being needed by anyone but myself. But I didn't waste time. I started looking for a permanent place right away. Without the burden of paying for my entire family, I had money saved up, and for the first time, I could actually use it for myself. I set a budget, browsed listings, and scheduled viewings. It felt strange to be planning my own future instead of constantly putting out fires for other people. By the end of the week, I found it. A one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and quiet, with enough space to finally have something of my own. The rent was affordable, and best of all, no one else would be depending on me to cover their share. When I signed the lease, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. Moving in was easy. I didn't have much, just the essentials I had packed when I left, a few things Chris helped me haul over, and some furniture I picked up secondhand. But standing in that apartment, with my name on the lease and my future entirely in my own hands, I knew I had made the right decision. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living. A week after settling into my new apartment, I thought I was finally free of them. I had my own space, my own money, and for the first time in years, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next demand or guilt trip. But, of course, they couldn't just let me go. It started with a single message from Mia late at night. They tried to get into your bank account. I sat up in bed, heart pounding as I read it again, making sure I hadn't misinterpreted. What? I typed back immediately. They were looking for your passwords, she replied. Dad and Liam. I heard them talking about it earlier. They were trying to get into your bank account, pretending to be you. Dad said something about calling the bank to reset your info. I clenched my jaw, feeling my hands tighten into fists. Of course, they did. The second they realized they weren't getting another cent from me, they turned to theft. They had probably gone through my old room, digging through whatever scraps I left behind, hoping to find anything that would give them access to my finances. And knowing them, they probably thought they were smart enough to pull it off. I didn't waste time. Within minutes, I was on the phone with my bank, locking down every single financial account I had. I changed every password, added two-factor authentication, and set up instant alerts for any suspicious activity. I made sure that no one but me could access anything tied to my name. By the time I was done, my phone buzzed again. They're looking for you now, Mia wrote. Liam is saying you owe them. I actually laughed at that. I owed them. After years of draining me dry, after taking everything I had without an ounce of gratitude, after kicking me out of my own house, they had the audacity to act like I owed them? Let them look, I replied calmly. They'll find nothing. Mia didn't respond right away, but when she did, her message was short. Be careful. I stared at those words for a long time, letting the weight of them sink in. They weren't just angry. They weren't just desperate. They were determined. But I wasn't afraid. I had spent years carrying them, funding them, sacrificing my own life to keep theirs from crumbling. Now, they had nothing. And that was exactly what they deserved. It was late, close to midnight, when the pounding on the door started. It wasn't a normal knock. It was loud, violent, the kind that made the walls shake. I had been sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half expecting something like this after Mia's warning. Still, hearing it in real time sent a cold rush through my veins. Tyler. My father's voice was filled with rage, slurring slightly, like he had been drinking. Open this damn door. Then came Liam's voice, sharper, angrier. We know you're in there. You think you can just screw us over and walk away? I stayed completely still, my pulse pounding in my ears. The pounding turned into kicking, heavy boots slamming against the doorframe. Open the door, you coward. I reached for my phone, my fingers steady as I dialed 911. My father and brother are outside my apartment trying to break in, I said, my voice calm but firm. They're shouting threats. One of them might be armed. Stay on the line, sir, the dispatcher responded. Officers are on the way. Another kick rattled the door, and then I heard something worse. The sound of wood splintering. Liam, get back. My father's voice was panicked now, but Liam wasn't listening. With a final, deafening crack, the door burst open, slamming against the wall. Liam came storming in, a baseball bat clutched tightly in his hands, his eyes wild with fury. You think you can do this to us? He screamed, his grip tightening around the bat as he raised it slightly, ready to swing. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just watched him. Liam, don't. My father barked from behind him, but it was too late. Liam lunged forward. Before he could even get close, the sound of sirens filled the air, flashing red and blue lights flooding through the windows. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, followed by the unmistakable command. Police, drop the weapon and get on the ground. Liam froze, his chest rising and falling in sharp, erratic breaths. For a second, I thought he might be stupid enough to swing anyway. But then he hesitated, his fingers twitching, his mind racing through the consequences. Get on the ground, the officer repeated. Liam dropped the bat with a loud clatter. Within seconds, they had him pinned, his hands wrenched behind his back, cuffs locking around his wrists. My father wasn't as quick. Wait, he stammered, his hands raised slightly. This is just a misunderstanding. The officers didn't care. He was shoved against the wall, his protests ignored as they secured him just as quickly as they had Liam. I exhaled slowly, my heart still hammering, but not from fear. From relief. I watched as they were dragged away, shouting, cursing, spitting venom at me. Liam was still trying to fight, his voice hoarse from screaming. You think this is over, you piece of garbage? You owe us. I didn't say a word. I just watched as the officers hauled them down the stairs and out of my life. For good this time. Liam and my father didn't spend much time in jail. The legal system wasn't about to lock them up for good, but they weren't let off the hook either. They both received conditional sentences, meaning they were officially criminals but still free to roam as long as they didn't mess up again. That was fine by me. I didn't need them behind bars. I just needed them out of my life. I thought that was the end of it. But of course, my mother had to remind me that there was still more damage to be done. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I wasn't planning to answer, but something told me I should. Tyler. The voice on the other end was thin, almost cautious. It's Mom. I stayed silent. Listen, I know things have been rough, she continued, her voice taking on that familiar pleading tone. But we need to talk. There are some of your things still here, and that was when I heard it. A man's voice in the background, bargaining, haggling. I clenched my jaw. Are you selling my stuff? I asked, my voice flat, cold. There was a pause. Well, she hesitated, clearly searching for the right words. You don't live here anymore, and we need the money, and I hung up. I didn't even need to think about my next move. Within minutes, I was filing a police report for theft, listing everything that had been left behind: electronics, furniture, clothes, and personal belongings. I had receipts, photos, proof of purchase. It wasn't long before an officer showed up at the house to put an end to whatever garage sale my mother had tried to run with my belongings. A few days later, I got most of it back. Some things were gone, sold off before I could stop it, but I didn't care about the items themselves. It was the principle. They had spent years taking from me, and now they were trying to scavenge what was left. That was when I made my final decision. I applied for a restraining order against all of them: my father, my brother, even my mother. It wasn't just about the stolen items or the attempted break-in. It was about making sure they could never touch my life again. The order was granted without much of a fight. The police report helped, as did the attempted identity theft, and before long, they were legally forbidden from contacting me. I changed my number. I blocked them on every platform. I disappeared from their world completely. The only connection I kept was Mia. She still had 2 years before she could legally leave, and as much as I wanted to go back and pull her out of that house myself, I knew I had to wait. We stayed in touch through texts and phone calls, but she never spoke much about what was happening at home. I could tell she was just holding on, counting down the days. And then, finally, she turned 18. She didn't even wait a full week before calling me. Can I come stay with you? Yes, I said without hesitation. She arrived with nothing but a single suitcase and a backpack, Her entire life compressed into what little she could carry. When she walked through my door, I saw something in her eyes I recognized immediately. Relief. The same relief I had felt 2 years ago when I walked away from that house for the last time. As I helped her settle into her new home, I knew one thing for certain. I had finally broken free. And so had she. 2 years after I walked away from the wreckage of my family, my life had never been better. I lived in my own apartment, one that was fully mine, not something I was paying for while others drained me dry. My job was stable, my savings account was growing, and for the first time in years, I was making plans for the future that actually involved me, not just keeping other people afloat. Mia had adjusted quickly to her new life. She was in college now, studying hard, finally able to focus on her own goals without the constant weight of our father's disappointment or our mother's passive guilt hanging over her. She lived with me, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She had her own space, her own independence, and she was finally free of the fear that had shaped so much of her childhood. My parents, on the other hand, weren't so lucky. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart once I was gone. Without my money to keep things running, the unpaid bills stacked up quickly. The house, the one I had unknowingly been keeping afloat for years, eventually went into foreclosure. My parents lost everything, forced to downsize into a cramped rental far from the life they had once been comfortable in. Liam had it even worse. After failing to con his way into another easy life, he made the kind of mistakes that landed people in prison. I heard through distant acquaintances that he had been caught dealing, trying to make quick money in the laziest way possible, and now he was serving time. It wasn't a surprise. He had always been looking for shortcuts, always believing he was smarter than everyone else, always thinking he was untouchable. And my mother, after years of standing by and letting it all happen, finally decided to reach out. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. No sudden visit, no tearful apology, no grand attempt to fix what had been broken. Just a simple letter, written in her neat, careful handwriting, filled with empty words about family and how time heals all wounds. I only sent one response. If you can't apologize for what you did, we have nothing left to say. She never wrote again, and that was fine by me. Now my life was quiet, simple, full of laughter. I had a woman in my life who saw me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I had a sister who was finally growing into herself, no longer afraid of her own shadow. We shared meals, talked about our days, made plans for the future. There were no more demands, no more guilt, no more weight dragging me down. Mia and I had left it all behind, and we had never been happier. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away the same way I did, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know what you think.